Kitu mimi nauliza nyinyi leo, ili tuone hawa walio katika siasa, wale walio watumishi wa serikali, sisi tuseme kwamba tufungue, tuondoe ile section ya katiba ya Kenya ya 2A.
My message today is that in a struggle, persistence and patience is what pays in the end.
Here we go.
Leaders of the opposition are assembling here.
Now concede that Mr. Muigai will be the third president of the Republic of Kenya.
Mimi Muigai, ewe Mwenyezi Mungu unisaidie.
When in 2002, all of us overwhelmingly supported President Kibaki, the country came together. And Kenyans were then adjudged as the most optimistic nation, the most optimistic people on earth. It was amazing.
Can't see what I use here for my second.
Wasiasa wanak.
Thank you.
The people have made a choice.
Eventually, the oranges were split.
Tunataka sasa tuendelee kwa debe, ama sio? Ama sio? Au mnaogopa? Mnajua domo domo. Domo domo. Domo. Kazi endelee.
I remember before I went to sleep, all right, I saw there was like a big gap. Raila was leading, and when I woke up the following morning, the gap had narrowed. And so when that happened, there was a lot of tension.
And please listen to us, there is something wrong.
I did not say figures are being cooked, but I said by staying with the papers for so long, one would suspect they are cooking. There's a difference between suspecting and the actual cooking. Are these a sufuria?
We suggested that if we could find a judge who was ready and willing to swear Raila Amolo Odinga as President of the Republic of Kenya. So be it, because you could hear the former chairman of the Electoral Commission, Mr. Kiwitu, also complaining about the way the results were coming, and he said they must be cooking, the results somewhere. So we were absolutely convinced.
We can produce the agent from Nithi with information that was announced at the ground, which is not the same as the one that is being announced here.
You are the counting agency. You are the people who are to assure Kenyans that this process is free and fair.
When things took a turn for the worse, and we wanted that process to be interrogated by checking on the returns, basically the forms, the statutory forms that were being returned, we came to the conclusion that without a doubt, the results of the elections had been rigged in favor of President Kibaki.
In the morning, when announcements were made, which were ODM strongholds, and the figures were quite high, that time it did seem to hurt people's ears. When PNU score is high, ears are hurting.
As a candidate, everyone is always passionate. Whichever year you name, you cannot mess with my results after I have worked hard.
But from what we have seen from KICC, the meeting room there had to be abandoned.
So we went to meet him at the Nairobi Club. When we met, I had arrived earlier. So when he arrived, he came and said, "Congratulations, Raila. But the good news, you have won the elections. You won the elections. Forget about the figures that they're announcing. I know that you have won, but I know where those figures are being cooked."
Honorable Mwai Kibaki is the winner. The Commission therefore declares Honorable Mwai Kibaki as the President of Kenya.
Now the bad news is that Kibaki is going to be announced as the President of the Republic of Kenya this afternoon.
Mimi Mwai Kibaki naapa kwamba nitatenda kazi zangu za urais kwa Jamhuri ya Kenya.
Do you believe that Mwai Kibaki fairly won the election?
I don't know until I see eventually the records.
Then he hesitated a bit. He went then on and said, "Look, you have two options. Either to dispute the elections, in which case there will be a lot of bloodshed, I can promise you. Or the alternative is to accept the elections and negotiate with Kibaki and become his vice president."
When the country blew up, we were still in consultation, and I can't precisely remember. I never myself spoke to Kibaki directly, yeah. But there are those political advisors and others who were in touch with my party members. So my party got to meet, and we agreed to a meeting.
We do have a deal.
It's campaign time here in South Africa. Elections are just a month away in a country that has one of the continent's most stable electoral systems. Now, the people who helped build this system took part and managed the electoral process that saw Nelson Mandela become president in 1994. Part of that electoral body was a man who years later, 14 years later, would come to the aid of Kenya when it was having its own electoral troubles in 2008. That man is none other than Justice Johan Kriegler.
There was massive unhappiness, widespread from way up north, from Lodwar all the way down to the Indian Ocean. People were convinced that there had been major rigging. The word that rang around the country was rigging. Whatever rigging meant was something else. But there was a major perception of massive electoral fraud. The ultimate answer with which we came up, that there was very little, if any, fraud, certainly no fraud at the Kenya International Convention Center, where the ECK had its data collection system. There may have been at local level, yes, and there was. You know, you have people producing a turnout figure of 100% at a polling station, when you know that at least 15% of the people on the voters' roll are dead.
7 years on, and Justice Johan Kriegler's memories of the 2007 election are as sharp as were the assessments of the independent review of the election committee which he headed. The blame for an election that left Kenya bleeding was, in spades, heaped on the defunct Electoral Commission. Kriegler also offered a way out for Kenya. The DNA upon which Kenya's subsequent elections were to be built came from this report.
Our claim to fame, the only commission of inquiry in the history of Kenya that reported on time.
A timely guide that had hundreds of recommendations, from the abandoning of the poll book that held Kenya's registered voters, called the Black Book, to having electoral dispute resolution mechanisms built into the court system. But the more central recommendations had to do with transparency.
We recommended, number one, count, announce at the polling station. That's the first major step to avoid fraud and to establish public confidence, because it's a transparent process. That count at the polling station should then be transmitted electronically to the constituency level, where the constituency collation can be done for the parliamentary election. For the presidential, it goes straight through to the National Collation Center.
Kriegler's aging eyes have since been looking for reflections of how Kenya's electoral system has developed since. He got his chance in 2013.
Allow me now, at the returning of Sir, for this election, to provide you in total humility with the final tally of the presidential election results.
No, managing election in Kenya is a difficult job.
Raila Odinga, 5,340,546. Uhuru Kenyatta, 6,173,433. Since Uhuru Kenyatta has received 6,173,433, he has received more than 50.07%. I therefore declare Uhuru Kenyatta the duly elected President of the Republic of Kenya.
Do you think that this was a success for the IEBC?
I think it was a very big success for the IEBC, considering it was the first election of its kind, 6 elections of on the same day, with a huge logistical nightmare, a new electoral system, a very short time to do a lot of things. So I think, and we managed to pull off, I think, what was largely a peaceful and a credible election.
Ahmed Ishaq Hassan's youthful face doesn't give off any signs of regret when he speaks about the 2013 general election. As chairman of the 2.5-year-old Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, his has been a journey into the storm that is the Kenyan election that perhaps only one other chairman of a Kenyan electoral body could ever claim to have had, his predecessor, the late Samoei Kivwitu. He seems unshaken, even discouraging me from looking into the election.
No, but let me tell you the fact, Alan. You are chasing the wrong shadow, yeah. Yeah, it's a waste of time. The thing is over, it's done with. Do something else. Yeah.
It was a Herculean task for Ishaq and the commission. 6 elections in one day, millions of ballots, and the highest number of polling stations ever in a Kenyan election, 33,400. All things considered, he has been congratulated variously for even being able to carry out this election. But whether he'll admit it or not, there were flaws in that election which haunt his comfortable office. Some of these failings were apparent right from 6 a.m. on the 4th of March 2013. The line snaking around schools, social halls and public spaces as Kenyans lined up to vote would be a sight for sore eyes for any believer in the power of the ballot, especially after the bitter ending to the 2007 polls.
From 5 in the morning,
All seemed to be going well. That is, until IEBC officers who were manning the electronic voter identification kits that were supposed to identify every voter prior to their being allowed to cast their ballots started having trouble with these kits. The lines started growing longer and longer. The IEBC, which rode into the 2013 elections on the wings of a public confident in its abilities, at its first press briefing to the public at 9 a.m. on the morning of the polls, the IEBC had this to say.
We are aware that some poll books have malfunctioned due to a variety of factors, including power problems, and I want to thank the Kenyans who have offered to give power solution to the election officials at the different polling stations. However, in all such cases, the Commission has authorized where the machines have failed and there's no backup available. We have authorized the use of the printed version of the register, and this is happening across where there are problems with the poll books.
You see, when I went to vote myself, I was identified and I voted. But immediately a number of people went there and they said they could not be identified. And then all of a sudden they now begin to say that the battery ran out of power. This and that, and then they began consultations. And then a phone call comes, which now says that they should go manual.
I have profound suspicion of scientific gimmicks. And at the time when the whole biometric system was proposed in Kenya, I had serious misgivings about it. A machine is only as good as the people who operate it.
What the public didn't know was that for weeks prior to the election, political parties and the media had been asking the IEBC for a demonstration of how the voter identification kits and the electronic transmission system, the system that would carry results from polling station to the national tallying center at the Bomas of Kenya, would work. In public, the IEBC projected confidence. But a year after the poll, its chairman lets on that this confidence was hollow.
Many things led to the failure of the events. One of them was, of course, the late procurement, and so when they were delivered very late, Some of them were being delivered as late as 26th of February, when election is 4th of March. So imagine, even training the staff was very hard because they were being trained in theory.
Was this avoidable? Part of the answer lies in the entrenched positions, bitter squabbles and horse trading amongst IEBC commissioners and the IEBC secretariat that would lead to huge delays, and the eventual need for the central government to step in for the procurement of the biometric kits, and later the expensive mistakes that led to even further delays in the procurement of the EVIDs by the IEBC. Part of the answer lies in understanding how the biometric voter registration kits and the electronic voter identification devices were supposed to work together. The 442 system deployed by Safran Morpho, the company from which the government procured the BVR kits, meant that when a person showed up to register, they would have their 4 fingerprint images on the fingers of their right hand scanned as well as their thumbprint, and then repeat the same process for their left hand. In addition, a photograph of the person registering would be taken and data from the identification cards noted down. The data captured by the registration kit would then be saved onto a portable device and then uploaded to a central database from which IEBC officers could verify this register. The electronic voter identification device was a single fingerprint scanner hooked up to a laptop that had the registration data of Kenyans per polling station. The EVID, as it came to be known, was simply supposed to scan a person's fingerprint to verify whether the person who had shown up in front of the IEBC clerk was indeed a registered voter, after which a voter would be given access to vote. The biometric scanner used for the biometric voter registration, in essence, could have been used to do just this. We wrote to Safran Morpho to confirm whether, among other things, the BVR kits could work for voter identification. Safran Morpho's communications representative wrote back saying that our request was being considered for approval. By the time of the airing of this documentary, we had not received a final answer from Safran Morpho, so we asked other fingerprint identification experts.
Why should you have the 2? There is no specific reason why you would want to have the 2. Maybe the 442 scanner is expensive to buy in large scale, so maybe it would be cheaper to deploy cheaper scanners to all the other registration places, other places where you need to identify people.
The government had procured 15,000 BVR kits for the registration exercise, meaning that it would have required an additional 15,400 kits to use as electronic voter identification devices. It would have cost the government an additional $22 million. The IEBC would later procure 33,400 electronic voter identification devices and laptops for 1.3 billion shillings. That some of the electronic voter identification kits arrived in the country on the 26th of February is a very important fact to note in understanding their failure 6 days later. Here's why. Voting during the 2013 election would have to take place in 33,000 polling stations countrywide. That means that every single polling station would need one EVID machine. Deploying the machines to these polling stations aside, the real challenge lay in ensuring that all the machines would work.
You can imagine using 25,000 registration points, downloading the information onto a central server. And then what you had to do, that 25,000 registration points corresponded to 33,400 polling stations. Okay, so they had to divide that information. Now, 33,400 polling stations, right, corresponded to 1,450 wards. Okay, now 1,450 wards also corresponded to 290 constituencies. And 290 constituencies then corresponded to 47 counties. Okay, now somebody had to sit there and process the data and put it into the various compartments. Then what they said in the sworn evidence, affidavit evidence, IEBC say that they took the BVR register, cut it into slices, 1,450 slices, one for each ward, then loaded it onto something called an SD card. A lot of people would know using digital cameras. It's the card that you insert in your camera. Okay. They said that they uploaded it onto that, then inserted it into the EVID laptop or Evid handset, and I still haven't been able to find out what the handset is, but the laptop we know exists. Now, you imagine, how long did it take to do one? And then they had to do 33,400. Now, you imagine the logistics. It's not something that you do automatically. There's no card reader where you can insert 33,000 SD cards. They had to be done individually. Then they had to be delivered with the right laptop to the right locations in 16 days. How?
If it took 5 minutes to upload the data from one polling station onto an SD card, and the employees of the IEBC worked flat out without any breaks, it would take the people who were doing this 115.97 days. If it took just 1 minute, it would have taken the IEBC 23 days to do so, 11 days more time than they had if they had started doing so immediately they announced that they had the principal register of voters on the 20th of February 2013.
Some of them may not have had the SD cards fully loaded with the data. So when they went to the police station, you put the SD card, you put on the laptop, you find it is empty. That may have also happened in some police stations. Also, in most police stations, they forgot to charge the laptops or the devices before they took it to the police station. It requires to be charged 8 hours fully before you go and deploy it. And once the battery goes down, you change the batteries. And so, some of them actually went straight from the warehouse. They put the SD cards and they took it to the polling station. So after 2 hours, it just conked up like any other computer.
It started to go wrong at the point when the BVR was compiled.
Rajpal Sena, the proprietor of Opco UK, a British-registered IT consultancy firm with offices in Barcelona, consulted for the CORD presidential candidate Raila Odinga as CORD was putting together its petition for the Supreme Court. According to him, it wasn't just that the IEBC officers operating the EVIDs weren't trained or that the machines broke down that led to the failure of the EVIDs on March the 4th. According to Rajpal, the very center of the biometric data that the IEBC collected during the voter registration drive held between November and December the year before, the fingerprints of 14.3 million Kenyans were not saved in the correct format and couldn't be read at all.
A lot of people think that they were going up to an electronic device that was identifying them from their fingerprint. Well, it wasn't. And the reason is very simple. The biometric register doesn't actually have bitmap images. The biometric register, what they call the principal register, was submitted in petition number 5 in the Supreme Court, and I had the opportunity to examine it. It contains PDF images or PDF files. Now think of a PDF as just a print. That's all it is. Now recognition software can't use a print to work. It needs a bitmap image.
Sena's accusations would make for damning proof of incompetence at the IEBC that would be inexcusable. In fact, there is evidence that the IEBC saved the fingerprints of 14.3 million voters as PDFs. Dismas Ongondi, the IEBC's IT director, in his affidavit to the Supreme Court during the presidential petition, confirmed that the fingerprints were saved in this format. But was the saving of the fingerprints as PDFs part of the reason that people could not be identified electronically on the 4th of March? The Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, based in Pretoria, is South Africa's premier government-funded scientific research institute. And for a year and a half, Dick Mateja, a senior researcher in its biometrics department, has been developing fingerprint identification software. We asked him, as well as biometrics and smart cards research team leader Johan van der Merwe, whether the format in which the fingerprints are saved could affect whether they can be read.
So, I mean, if I captured my fingerprint image using a normal scan and I converted it to a PDF image, it would probably give me something closer to this.
Not closer, it looked the same.
It would look the same.
Or to your eye at least, yes.
So meaning to the computer's eye, it would be easy to identify.
It would be easy to identify the points. As long as when you convert it to PDF, obviously you set everything accordingly and you make sure that the quality, a lot of the quality is not lost.
The issue isn't the PDF. If the fingerprint is in a readable format, if you can see the fingerprint there, it doesn't matter the format, if it's of a good enough quality, it can be used by the rest of the system to extract the features and achieve identification and verification later on. So the issue isn't the PDF or the bitmap or the JPEG, or the format isn't so much of an issue as what the process is. You need to make sure that you get all the necessary information in whatever format you choose. And you must make sure that when you have different systems, you can have multiple systems talking to one another, as long as they can talk to one another.
So, if the format in which Kenyans' biometric data was saved wasn't the cause of the failure of the EVIDs, what was? A failure to learn from the ECK's mistakes in 2007, it would appear, were the seeds of the failure of the machines that cost Kenyans over 1 billion shillings.
The ECK had acquired a large number of high-powered portable laptop computers in order to do the electronic transmission of data. Ultimately, they didn't use any of those computers. It was a wasted expenditure. They did not train their staff to use them, so they shrunk from using electronics, reverted to old-time pen and paper, and the system just broke down because it was too complicated.
Logistics, it was planning, it was deployment, it was training, it was charging of the laptop equipment. But you have seen the by-elections, when we have now enough time to train the staff, to charge the equipments, to put the data properly. They all work 100%. So that shows you that there was no problem with the software or the equipments. It was managerial, it was human failure.
Speaking to failures in the field, that has nothing to do with biometrics. That has something to do with manufacturer, it has something to do with implementation, it could be the weather, it could be one of a million things, could have been a bad batch, but it has nothing to do with biometrics.
I sent an email asking James Oswago to respond to claims that the failures on March the 4th were managerial. Given that Oswago is the CEO of the IEBC, failures of management would thus be attributed to him. Oswago met with us at our offices and promised to come back for an on-camera interview that afternoon. He said that he was willing to give us full disclosure on the questions we were asking, but could only do so if the chairman of the IEBC, Ishaq Hassan, approved the interview.
I cannot respond to that, Alan. I think the chairman himself can explain what he meant by talking about managerial, talking about logistical, and talking about training. But we have since discussed this with the chairman, and this goes to confirm to you that me and the chairman, we consult and we speak. I'm out of the commission, but still when you called me, we met and we discussed. And the understanding that we had. But let me tell you, you are moving to an election. Running an election is like preparing for war. It's a very complex thing. It has got its own strict timelines. There are things you can change, there are things you can't change. It is possible some things will conform to the plan, it is possible some things may not. All these things could be characterized as managerial, they can be characterized as logistical. But anyone who has ever run an election of this magnitude, particularly where you are introducing this vast level of technology, knows that there could be areas where the hope for performance will be less than the delivery.
Training, compatibility issues, and general incompetence around the deploying and handling of the EVID machines were the festering, open wounds of a disease that began to grow, it seems, once Face Technologies, the South African firm that would provide these machines to Kenya, won the tender to supply the kits to the IEBC. We have in our possession correspondence between officials from Face Technologies and various officers of the IEBC that point to laxity in the manner in which the IEBC proceeded with the execution of their end of the bargain. In these emails, Face Technologies laid down the terms and conditions under which they would be able to supply their evids, giving the date of December the 1st for the signing of the contract between the IEBC and Face, making official each party's undertakings and commitments. December the 1st was crucial because it would have allowed Face Technologies to procure all the implements it needed to tailor-make the electronic identification devices. Red flags were also raised early about these delays by organizations that were helping the IEBC organize the election. On December the 7th, exactly 1 month after the Face Technologies tender had been awarded, Ronan McDermott, the ICT consultant for the International Foundation for Electoral Systems, which was working with the IEBC, wrote, "A couple of important points. Because of the long delay between award and today, the vendor has had to modify the device specification because they simply cannot source the components. The vendor's position was clear in late November. If you want the devices delivered, you must sign a contract by December the 1st. That has now long passed, so in order to get any hardware at all, you're faced with surrendering the 3G modem component." The email continues. Unlike BVR, where a 30-day period offered IEBC the luxury of resolving the initial hiccups, with EVID you only get one chance to get it right, and you have to get it right at 30,000 locations simultaneously. No opportunity to patch, fix, respond, mitigate. It's the classic Big Bang nationwide rollout of a new technology. In a nutshell, compatibility is just one of the issues facing the IEBC on this procurement. This email was sent to the Deputy Commission Secretary and copied to the IEBC's CEO, James Oswago, as well as the Commission's IT Director, Dismas Onwondi. Another precondition that Face Technologies had given was the provision of a letter of credit, effectively ensuring that the IEBC had the funds to pay for the EVIDs. Face Technologies' original timeline guide was to have the EVIDs made and delivered to Nairobi on the 31st of January 2013. Without this letter of credit, the EVIDs could not be delivered to Nairobi. This letter was written to IEBC's CEO, James Oswago, by a Mr. A. Applegrin, the financial director of Face Technologies. It's dated the 16th of January 2013, just 46 days to the election. The most critical financial instrument, the letter of credit, has until close of business yesterday not been issued. We informed the IEBC in December 2012 of the unavoidable consequences if the agreed financial model was not adhered to, as we are not in a position to contest for priority with our suppliers. These delays would, in the end, lead to the supply of kits that had far less of the hardware requirements to work than had been promised at the time of the tender. Precious little time for compatibility testing with the data procured by Safran Morpho, and even less time to train the people who are going to operate these machines. A senior member of the IEBC Secretariat, speaking to us on condition of anonymity, claimed that these delays were not out of procedural red tape, but, quote, either out of a keenness of those at the center of facilitating Face Technologies to extract bribes from Face Technologies, or to frustrate Face Technologies because the vendor that they had been backing did not win the tender to supply the IEBC with electronic voter devices, end quote.
There were also problems with the
4 IEBC Secretariat members, including CEO James Oswago, are now facing charges in court over the bungled procurement of the EVIDs and the biometric voter registration kits. Isaac Hassan is a prosecution witness in that case.
So the whole procurement was done not for the benefit of Kenyans and of having the general elections be a better and more transparent election, but the target was how much can come to the pockets of the mandarins, of the cartels waiting to reap from it.
If you look at the charges which are facing the officers, it's not about loss of money or theft of money.
is about failing to follow procedure or forgetting to do something which was required to be done in procurement.
The public had been primed for a smooth election, but a few days prior to the election, the IEBC had the challenge of assuring contestants that their votes would be protected. That didn't happen.
Why didn't you say that you weren't ready?
Time was on our side. We could not, and there was no time to postpone the elections. Election was 4th of March, and we were assured by the management that they were working around the clock, sleeping past 3 a.m. at night every night to make sure these things were working.
Now Kenya presidential candidate Martha Karua's recollections of that time are vivid.
I am not satisfied at all. Yeah, being silent doesn't mean being satisfied. There were too many flaws in the 2013 elections. And it's not just about the late procurement. When we went for the last meeting as presidential candidates with the Electoral Commission at the Grand Regency, you could almost hear the Electoral Commission saying, the systems will fail. They were preparing us for a failure of the systems. When a failure is not guesswork, is almost premeditated, then you are left baffled. And we kept on telling the chairman of the IEBC together with his group, do not plan on the BVR failing. And if you think that there may be some failure somewhere, plan on a backup.
So we told them, allow us to use this printed copy of the register to enable us, because this thing we will not be able to do it in good time. And they said, no, no way. You must do it. All of them refused. Okay, some few of them were not averse to us going. I think Dida. I think the smaller parties. But the big boys, Raila and his running mate Uhuru and his running mate, and especially Martha Karua, were very, very particular about these machines being there. And Kenyans have been made to believe that technology will solve all problems. And because we don't trust each other, it's better we trust the machine.
Taking last-minute decisions is never a good idea, whether it's in running an election or running a motor car. But it happens, because I repeat, it's a very, very complicated exercise. Something occurs at the last minute and you may have to take a desperation move. What I would say, though, is that if that happens, you should ensure that the principal participants in the race know what you are doing, know why you are doing it, and if you can possibly attain it, you get consensus on your having to do it.
He was preparing for a failure. He was certain it would fail from his tone. So when you tell people that we are going to have electronic elections, which will be better, which will be more foolproof in the sense that once you are identified biometrically, you can't vote twice. And then you're telling us that system of identifying people will fail. You're preparing us that this is business as usual.
With the help of the media that did not question the failure of the EVIDs and what was a public mood wary of stirring any emotions that could lead to violence, the IEBC's first error was allowed to slip. They, after all, had a backup, a copy of the principal register. The public quickly whipped itself back into a positive electoral mood. Throughout the day, thousands of Kenyan voters posted pictures of their purple fingers as a sign that they had voted. But the absence of the EVID meant that IEBC officers would have to search for people's names in the register manually. Add to that, the fact that Kenyans were voting for their favorites in 6 elective posts doubled the amount of people that were on the ballot in 2007, and the result was enormous lines slinking around every part of the country. A delay in the close of polls in various regions. But after the delay, the moment of truth was upon the IEBC. At first, the results transmission system seemed to be working. Information from the polling stations gave Uhuru Kenyatta, Jubilee's presidential candidate, the early lead in the presidential race, with Raila Odinga, CORD's presidential candidate, coming in a close second. But the unexpected contender that threatened any candidates reaching the 50% plus one threshold from very early on wasn't even in the candidates column. Just hours into the start of vote counting and tallying, the number of rejected votes had surpassed those of all but 3 candidates. Something was not right. The 2010 referendum was testament to how electronic transmission of results could keep the country abreast of what had transpired during the voting process. By the time the result came in, every Kenyan was satisfied with the process and trusted the result that yielded a new constitution. That RTS system was put together by Next Technologies, a local company. So it seemed that this would be the least controversial part of the electronic setup that the IEBC went for in 2013. But then a decision was taken to abandon the results transmission system that worked during the referendum and tailor-make a new RTS months to the election. The company that would be contracted to do this was Japak GIS. The changeover was, according to insiders, meant to include the improvement of verification of where results were coming from through GPS mapping, as well as other add-ons that would make the process smoother. However, the technology that was to be deployed was not tested. On the day prior to the election, at the Bomas of Kenya, the media was supposed to have been allowed to observe a dry run of how the results transmission system, the one system that would literally keep the public informed of what direction the presidential results were headed, we were informed by a senior member of the IEBC Secretariat that this was because as late as Monday, March the 4th, the IT department of the IEBC was still tinkering with the system, trying to improve on it. A misadventure that would, by the IEBC's own admission, lead to the transmission of results from just 13,000 polling stations.
The results transmission worked 48%, and those 48% were accurate. Polling station by polling station were accurate to the point. In fact, you could even, and they were very good, because people who were in the US were calling me and telling me they were able to follow the result online from the polling station data.
It failed. It failed. Let's admit it. Well, it started working a little, about transmitted about less than 40%, but then it failed. So we can't say that it worked.
That statement, combined with the claim that the RTS worked for 48% of the time, glosses over the fact that the IEBC abandoned the results transmission system way before the 48% efficiency threshold was reached.
But another interesting thing, Rita, was Issa Kassen's admission about the failure of the electronic system of transmission of votes. What does that portend? It almost seems as if that failure, that technical failure, is forcing the IEBC to go in contravention of the Elections Act, Section 82, I believe.
Yeah, indeed, John-Allan, the IEBC admitting that it was experiencing technical issues, but Issa Kassen during that press briefing saying that Safaricom, which was the conveyor of this data in this election, was not to blame, but now he admitted and said that in fact they're now abandoning the electronic vote transmission system and going manual. And so far 23 constituencies out of the 290, so it appears we might be waiting for a little longer here until Friday.
It's the evening of March the 8th, 2013. It has been 4 days since voting, and everyone is watching votes trickle in. The IEBC's Chief Executive Officer, James Oswago, the man in charge of the nuts and bolts of the election, has just re-emerged after being absent for a number of hours. His absence has caused mass speculation amongst members of the public, some even going as far as saying that he had been kidnapped. He assures the public that he's okay, but only he knows why he was absent. While away, he receives a phone call from a confidant from within the Cord coalition. The conversation lasts for 1 hour and 8 minutes. It reveals much more about the electoral process, it would seem, than the anxieties of a man in charge of an election that had accidental failings. We have been able to access recordings of this phone call and subsequent phone calls between Oswago and this individual between March the 8th and March the 26th, 2013. The recordings were provided to us by the individual who Oswago was speaking to, a confidant from within the Cord coalition who we are calling Mr. X. In the first phone call, Oswago and this confidant converse in Luo, and he points out a number of things that have been bothering him.
electronic transmission Gidonje, I said almost I have done on IFS, International Foundation for Elections.
I know IFS.
I had asked Michael Yard, we don't talk. I had a very big issue there. But he has told me almost 100 times, opinion team
They don't get to influence the whole thing in their favor.
Yes. People can hear you. Understand. Number 1, 200, 200. So this spike in an election, what you need is the results come at random. You expect if someone can take Yomba, someone will be banana juice, someone Akali, somebody Yomba. It cannot be constantly. In moreover, given that the final tally is so close.
Yes.
If the eventual tally is such that time one could do it in a year, anyone, you look at a million at a day, I look at a G Prario, I look at a G Prelino million and GL, I look at a yellow from the GL.
Yeah.
Yeah, what you do what I'm popular from the beginning. But how can it be? Any work from 32,462 simultaneously. Your performance is so regular, constant. Opinion, whether it is random theory, whatever, it can work.
Alan, I listened to that. First, I can't recognize my voice. Secondly, the other correspondent of mine is totally distorted. So even if I were able to reconstruct and ask if it was me or not, I can't. That is not me. That's not my voice. But the issues, every single issue that is raised there, I can respond to, and very truthfully.
The IFES being referred to in this conversation is the International Foundation for Electoral Systems, and Michael Yard was the organization's chief of party in Kenya. IFES had been supporting the IEBC with strengthening its electoral systems. According to a senior member of the IEBC Secretariat, it was IFES that had paid for the new results transmission system, but more than that, IFES had bought the servers that the IEBC was using to receive the electronic tally of results. Like Oswago, this member of the Secretariat claims that Michael Yard of IFES had been challenged about the safety of the data and would constantly respond that the IEBC data was safe. In this Secretariat member's words when referring to the IEBC's data security, quote, "We were left with so many risks that were not contextualized," end quote.
We interrogated IFES on whether the system is fault-proof and whether it can be subject to manipulation. On the last meeting we had with IFES, a day before the general election, the senior most representative of IFES talked to commissioners at Bomas. And the specific question he was asked is, 1, will the system work? 2, is the system liable in any way to malfunction or manipulation or interference? His answers, the system will work, and 2, it cannot be manipulated. That was the answer, a day before the election.
The fact that, as I told Oswago, that I understand tomorrow electronic transmission system is going to fail, it failed. What other proof do you want?
How unlucky then was the IEBC that on this one very important election, all of these things would coalesce to go wrong?
I don't think it's fair to say that they all went wrong. They were wrong. They did not perform optimally. I think I would say maybe we are too ambitious to deploy 3 technologies in the same day. You know, there's an African proverb which I quoted in Bomas, which says, "Never test the depth of a river with both feet."
This river, it would appear, may have had a dangerous undercurrent if IEBC CEO James Oswago's allegations were anything to go by. The conversation continues.
It can't work. One day we were shocked.
It can't work. So people should be able to demonstrate. When we were expecting to receive about 2,000 hits per second.
2,000?
2,000 hits per second. If 2,000 hits per second, per second. So the final tally, 05 to 06 and 05.5.
Yes.
There can be DNA that it cannot be.
You don't get before, because of who chatting in.
It is possible.
Actually,
possible, it is highly probable.
It is highly
probable.
Oh, ngarigini lunia.
Oswago goes on to name this person. In the correspondence that we have seen between the IEBC and members of IFES, a person going by this same name has been copied. We cannot conclusively verify if indeed this person was involved in any way in the plot that Oswago alleges, and thus cannot name him in this report. Oswago, as the conversation continues, then gets into his own suspicions about this man.
Huh? Jogwenya maja kachera. Oh, ngano ni karukanyo.
Yeah.
Oh, koro karukanyo mbi. Odonyo karukanyo. Just recently.
And Manu Kate in charge of developing that. Puro kete jomoko na gede jomoko boye kanyo kana ng'iyo ni jogo bro ng'iyo kaka timo gino. To bang'e kaka odo ju achiel jago jakora ni ng'ano bing'eyo ni ng'ano ng'atwa.
Ng'ama koni?
Jauganya ma jafwengo.
Oh, makose ka how long?
Otom ju achiel tu.
Oh, but last week.
Yeah.
To chairman no ng'eyo.
Kapat, well, okay, I'll ng'eyo, an awuondo naketo, kapat no ng'eyo. Maybe you never know. Lakini kata ka nindike, to jo panel manokawe nokawe ka gin jok moko ni bedo corrupted. Means ni nyaka bedi ni konyo high tech mang'eny.
Oh, nokonyo high tech mondo donji. Koro gini ng'eyo last week.
Ng'e jagwenyo wachona. Jagwenyo luonge to pimo nada kon biek nyabicha ne. We were so busy moko mia picha. Koro kana gini bika mata kone no bwana. Gimano jani kasa ni right. Yan kana neno gini. Everybody was telling me gini opinion temer kama. How? I don't know kind.
There is this allegation that there is an external person. And we are saying maybe. But the question is, we are saying our system for recruitment is so rigorous that it would be difficult for a person, an external person not qualified, to pass in through that process. And that comes out very clearly in the thing that I had yesterday.
Mangizo nini wondo nyisa chichigi credibility of the whole process. Karaga puko chake. The whole, the process.
Oh. Ina no kana chichi kon kiti gina was. Ananyo ni kanya kama problem bro woki.
Oh, ni singa ni problem buko kanyo.
To kananyo ni problem ni joko bro donje. Nanyo ni kinyalo donje. Ya fonati mungi mwana manyalo ng'eyo tem no kinyalo donje but na ng'eyo. Ninyalo kel ng'ato moa kocha. Makuri jok miyo roti gini gi. Kara mana jok matiti ni jok moko maoko. Yani indiko ng'ato kana ni jetetedo ni kara mana
Jone.
Yo sigi mo nda kodi.
Utingo sumo fuko.
Utingo sumo fuko kato biro no berma. Mokure go. Yo mokuru tendi mumia mondo mondi here go meet no kondo mjama kene ngalo. Madu soup we got anything man. Ndiko ngaber manade.
Ngare ni simbe lwete mit manade.
Koni ngane no lor ko tedo no meet. No. Oh, karuri di mana no mi raksa ni koro ke tumbo ni no to.
Koro ngare mune go.
To ken kende? Apa ni mano just one on them. To kaka another thing on your no bada. I was saying electronic robotic one.
Prior to this part of the conversation, Oswago describes his suspicion that a senior member of Kenya's intelligence services may have had a hand in infiltrating the IEBC's data. He makes a description of this person so as to leave little doubt about who he's talking about. As we cannot, at this time, independently verify Oswago's claims, we cannot name this individual in this report.
I was not suspicious that it was infiltrated. But I will tell you, frankly speaking, that as the CEO, and the thing has failed, and failed badly as such, you ask yourself critical questions, and you ask yourself logical questions. And there are about 7 questions which we asked ourselves. One of them was that.
There was absolutely no infiltration. I don't understand you say infiltration by who, but we were fully in control of our systems. And to my knowledge, I have no evidence of any infiltration.
I have no doubt that if a senior electoral administrator says, I personally have misgivings, the major cause is lack of communication between the different levels of the electoral administration. It's clearly a sign of lack of training, lack of communication, if at a senior level you have a lack of confidence in your own process. Sam Kuitu expressed the same misgivings in 2007-8. It was one of the matches to the haystack that caused the fire, when he in semi-jest, suggested that they were cooking the books somewhere up there on Mount Kenya. He thought it was funny, and maybe it was funny, but in retrospect it wasn't quite that amusing, because people who hadn't had the suspicion then did have the suspicion.
If we find any scooped figures, and I hope God will, when I go upstairs, I want to go and lock myself in my room and pray, so that I can get insight and see those who have scooped figures. They will get no salary for the entire period.
Even if there was internal interference, you would not expect a person from outside sitting there doing all those manipulations. It will manifest itself in a certain manner, isn't it? So you need experts to come and tell you, we have checked 1, 2, 3, 4. All these are working. Therefore, the only option here is external manipulation. And that is the result of this post-election evaluation in how the ICT function failed, or worked. No, failed. And that can be made available by the Commission.
Oswago's claims that the results transmission system and the IEBC server may have been compromised came just hours before the announcement of the election result. But the IEBC had indications that the RTS may have had bugs that it needed to work out in a quote election it carried out a week prior to March the 4th. In its report on the elections titled The Democratic Paradox, the Kenya Human Rights Commission quotes what took place in this incident. A week prior to the elections, the IEBC convened a meeting of political parties' representatives at the Sunshine Holiday Inn in Nairobi. The meeting was to test the efficacy of the equipment that would be used in counting votes and relaying the results to a central location. A mock election was organized by dividing the participants into 5 groups of 3, each group consisting a quote polling station. The other participants were to observe the results trickle in on a screen. When voting at the polling stations began, the results could not be transmitted to the tallying center. Much to the surprise of the participants, the equipment failed. It is only after an hour that the polling stations managed to transmit results to the tallying center. This mock election foreshadowed almost exactly what happened starting March the 4th. Results from the point when the IEBC abandoned the results transmission system would have to be physically brought to the National Tallying Center at the Bomas of Kenya. It is at this point where claims that a local call center named Kencall would find itself at the center of the tallying process of the IEBC, despite Isaac Hassan's denial of the same.
The result transmission was different from the call center. The call center was purely telephone calls from the field
to address what?
To address problems that they were facing in the field. Yes.
So not results.
No, not result. No.
I actually executed the agreements with Kencall just to provide that platform, really, which was an exclusive platform for call services, callbacks. You know, we were calling our agents on every single second.
Was it only a call service that Kencall was delivering? What else?
You see, call service, when you receive a call, you reduce that call into data. You translate a call into data, you know? Because what are you calling for? You're not calling to greet them, you're calling to inquire, how is the voting like? Are we experiencing any issues? And our calling center began actually at 3 a.m.
At the Bomas of Kenya, a few meters outside the main hall where the presidential election tally was being announced, a black cable juts out of the ground. It seems out of use now, But during the election, this was Kencol's fiber optic link from its offices along Mombasa Road to the Bomas of Kenya. Since the end of the election, this has been the one physical cord that the opposition has held on to in its claims that Kencol was used to manipulate the election. Kencol provided call center services to both TNA and the IEBC during the election. While the IEBC, TNA and Kencol itself stand by their assertions that nothing untoward was going on, it is only when CORD's legal team, during the Supreme Court petition, raised the fact that Kencol had a business relationship with both the National Alliance and the IEBC that this was admitted.
Now this call center was based in Bomas of Kenya. We gave them a room. They were there under guard, and they were printing out the report for the Commission's Secretariat every 1 hour. Now we understand now from the Supreme Court case that TNA also used the same company to give them a call center. So maybe they also employed 20 staff or 30 staff, had their own office somewhere else, and they also received calls from the agents. Now, sharing a company which is giving you a service. If you are supplying water, Alan, and I ask you to supply me water, and the producer also gives you the same order, it doesn't mean that we are sharing we are sharing a server with you. We are only sharing your service. You are a service provider.
What is the conflict of interest of if the president and I use Safaricom lines? Is there a conflict of interest? If Justice Mumbi Ngugi uses a Safaricom line and I, as a petitioner before her, is an ardent user of Safaricom services, is there a conflict of interest? If all of us take super loaf, is there a conflict of interest because we're enjoying services from the same service provider? Kencol's chief executive, Nick Nesbitt, in his sworn affidavit to the Supreme Court, denied that there was any conflict of interest in offering the services that Kencol did to both the IBC and TNA, explaining the differences in the menus of services offered to either party. In the 800-page addendum to CORD's original affidavit, the CORD legal team gave an internet protocol number that it claims was the missing link in providing that not only was there a conflict of interest in Kencol serving both TNA and the IEBC, but that the address could actively be used to access the IEBC's and TNA's data simultaneously. The IP address is 196.1.26.40.
No one, even in the Supreme Court case that issue came up, no one gave the identity of the alleged server that was shared, because if you have the identity where the identity is a name, so let's say that that server was called Dennis. If that server was called Dennis, anyone who gives a log that shows the name of that server that was used by IBC and TNA and correlates will have a case. But in the Supreme Court they were unable to prove that fact because it does not exist. It's a figment of imagination of the highest order.
IP address 196.1.26.40. shared both by TNA and IEBC.
I'll take the protocol number. We'll run a test on my iPad. Then let's see where it goes to. You know, that's the first basic test. Then from there, CCK would give you very good answers on that in terms of location of that place. If that place goes to, if it goes to Kencol, then the next bit of it is to check what exact server it was. But that's also another malicious thing, because unless the person who gave the internet protocol number hacked into the servers, and Kencol does not have one server because they outsource, that's their business, so they don't have one, then it will still need to go into evidence. And if they had such kind of evidence, why didn't they win the Supreme Court? They would have tabled it.
Kencol did not host our server. This is something which we argued in Supreme Court. Our server were hosted here in the head office and off-site, out of the office, in a secure location.
The Oswago phone calls seem to suggest that the IEBC's election data was not as safe as its chairman, Ishaq Hassan, may have thought. What nobody seemed to know at the time is that the suspicions held by Oswago were allegedly being interrogated by a man in the shadows. And what he claims he found is a smoking gun allegedly pointing to the manipulation of the electronic tally that the public was following. A plan that he claims involved one half of the ruling coalition, TNA, KENCO, and the IEBC itself.
Trying to escalate and get into the KENCO servers.
As tension and controversy began to build around the Supreme Court petition, this video popped up on the internet. It shows a silhouette of a man who demonstrates how he was able to uncover, albeit illegally, a scheme to allegedly manipulate the electronic tally that the public saw. The video has obviously been pre-packaged to look like a live demonstration of how this man managed to uncover this, but the explanation, nonetheless, deserves a second look, because it chiefly was from the sensational claims made in this video that the narrative about hacking and manipulation of the IEBC's data began to build, both as a talking point and as an alleged piece of evidence that would find its way to the Supreme Court. He begins with an explanation of how he allegedly hacked into the server of call center KENCO.
They're going to do the privilege escalation and get the usernames and the passwords and get right into the database, the live database as at now as we are speaking.
Then, how he was able to read off the database of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Then, how he read off the TNA database.
There we go. There we go. There we go. This is exact thing that we are looking for, resting on IEBC database under KENCO. As you can see down here, we are able to see the constituency code. For instance, constituency number 148, there is Marakwet West.
It was this video that was the basis of allegations that the election was rigged electronically. These allegations would be seized upon by the Court Coalition, and the information from this video would eventually find its way into Raila Odinga's Supreme Court petition. The information seemed to answer the questions that IEBC CEO James Oswago was asking himself. How was it that the margin between Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga barely changed as results began to come in? Fast forward to 10 months after he made this video, we sought this man out to record his allegations. In the bowels of one of Nairobi's suburbs, we met Joseph, not his real name, working on a number of new projects on his computers. On his walls are the cryptic creeds of men and women whose worlds exist online, behind the walls put up to protect individuals, institutions, and government's private information. Joseph tells us that he's a black hat, or a person who hacks into people's private networks out of pure malice or for fun. His shadowy part in the election debacle, he claims, started on March the 4th, 2013. He is a man in the video.
And get into the KENCO servers.
He claims that after observing how the numbers were moving from the evening of the 4th of March, he decided to investigate whether there was any link between TNA and the IEBC.
When we realized that rigging was going to take place, I tried now start searching every single thing that was connected with the TNA and IEBC. So when we tried everything possible to see whether there was any connection, is when we came with the proof that it was true. The database was accessed by me on the 5th, and I was able to see this data as on 6th. That's the data that you're having. And that's
then, step by step, he takes me through what he claims to have done.
This firm called KENCO were employed by the TNA as a call center. When I searched the KENCO online, I managed to find that their servers were able to be reached by anyone online. So I threw in my stars, my tools online to their servers, and I was able to get a constant connection to their servers. Their tools are these exactly. Okay, they are penetration testing tools. These are softwares that have been written by different programs, C++ and Python to be precise. And these are very strong software. They can get into the ports of any computer network and give you a remote connection without the other user noticing that you are connected.
Okay.
Yes.
So once you got into the server of Kencall, what did you find out?
I found out that these two servers for the Kencall and the ones for the IEBC that was based at Bomas of Kenya, they were mirrored.
We use the same password we used the other time for the sysdba, and there we go, we are inside. We are inside. TNA, this is the database name, TNA and TNA as sysdba. Let's look for the tables and see if the table that we had found earlier, on IEBC database, if it's the same table and has the same owner as it was. There we go. Constituency number 1, up to, down. We move down to constituency, the last constituency number 291. And there we have the figures that you're looking for. They are really telling.
The database management software that both TNA's and IEBC's databases were being managed on was, according to Joseph, from American software giant Oracle. The name of the software is Oracle 11 Golden Gate, one of the most sophisticated data management softwares created.
There's something called database. These databases, they had different schemas. They raise a schema and different tables. Within a schema you find different tables. Now there was a table for TNA, there was a table for Kencall, and there was a table for IEBC. The table for IEBC and the table for TNA were very identical, and these are the tables that were transmitting the results. They were mirrored together.
It is in the manner in which the Oracle software archives activity on its databases that Joseph claims backs the allegation that not only was information being mirrored between the two databases, but in fact the TNA database was an exact copy of the IEBC database in every aspect save for its name. Oracle produces log files that note down almost every aspect of a database from its size to its name. Joseph showed us files that he alleges are the log files from both TNA and the IEBC. Created just hours within each other, each of the two log files appear to be of the same size, dimensions, and contain similar information.
No, there was no server that we shared. Yeah, there was no server that we shared at all.
Done by who? Done as a picture, not done as an analysis. It was done as pictures on blogs. People came up with server logs and put them on blogs as pictures. I can make a Photoshop picture and show server logs going together to this.
On 2 occasions, we asked the management of Oracle to grant us an interview to, among other things, ask them to verify as far as they could whether the log files that Joseph presented to us were indeed real. Oracle declined to take part in this documentary. So we went to local data handling company, East Africa Data Handlers. Its managing director and founder, George Njoroge, is one of the few computer forensic experts in the country. After a few minutes of analyzing the printouts of these log files, he gives us his analysis.
The generation of the log files
can't be generated by a human being. They can be done by somebody, an individual. And if they do relate to IEBC, I would bet you money they were done by an individual. Okay, and they are not legit. And these I would bet on anything that I have. The first thing that discredits this is the first element. When you look at the group, the log file, group 1, the size of the log file is stated as 551,200 KB. That's the size of the log file. In comparison, if you were to think of it, the IEBC database for an election with about 30,000 polling stations, it cannot be less than 600-700 GB. The log file would be close in about half of that, so about 200-300 GB.
We also showed the log files that Joseph alleges are real to a database administrator working for a prominent local bank. The bank uses Oracle 11G to manage its own data. While declining to comment on camera because of the position he holds in that company, he told us that the log files that we had shown him could not have been created by any other program other than Oracle, pointing to the possibility that these log files may indeed be real. But the devil, as they say, is in the details.
See? The size is K, not KB, because all these sizes is measured. There's no K.
Yeah.
The lowest form of data is KB. Then you move to MB, then you move to GB, then you move to TB. Okay? There's no K. So you find this size 51,000 K cannot.
So it means that
it's
it
questionable.
May have been manipulated.
It may have been manipulated.
In order to ascertain whether there was manipulation that actually did take place, Joseph would have to prove that the vote tally was actively being changed on one end and reflecting on the other. This is what he claims he found.
We can see we have the totals for Kenyatta is 6,173,433 as was announced. There for Odinga 5,340,546 as was announced. So we are on the real database. We are on the real database. 6,273,433. There Odinga has 5,340,546. Remember, this is a different database. This is TNA, and they're being hosted on one specific machine. They're being hosted on one specific machine.
George disputes the allegation that Joseph actually was on the right database.
This is not from an SQL. This is not from an Oracle database, but it's from an SQL database. So this, you can see from here, the data is SQL. It is not Oracle. When that discredits the actual data sitting on an Oracle database, then being produced on an SQL. It's not possible.
The database administrator we spoke to also raised a red flag about this database. He said that the use of the name Scott as a folder in which the IEBC data would be kept was suspect. Scott, he says, is usually the default name of an Oracle folder used for training purposes.
Because if you have the identity, where the identity is a name, so let's say that server was called Dennis. If that server was called Dennis, anyone who gives a log that shows the name of that server that was used by IEBC and TNA and correlates will have a case. But in the Supreme Court, they were unable to prove that fact. Data does not disappear. Even when you delete data, do you think it just disappears from the world?
We contacted Kencall CEO Nick Nesbitt to give him an opportunity to respond to the claims that Joseph made regarding the alleged involvement of his company in this alleged scheme. After initially asking us to send the questions we had for him in order for him to decide whether he'd respond, a further request from me elicited this response from Nesbitt via SMS, quote, "That chapter is closed," end quote. Kenya's Chief Justice Willy Mutunga, while giving his reflections about the Supreme Court petition, told us that he handled a section of the petitioner's claims that focused on the use of technology.
Did you see any evidence that TNA and IEBC shared a server and that the server mirrored, the servers mirrored each other and that they could be manipulated?
Well, that evidence was brought, right? And it was also, you know, it was also controverted, you know, by evidence from the Jubilee people, right? And ultimately, this is the evidence that I'm talking about, you know. A lot of people, I notice, remembered evidence of their favorite, you know, favorite candidates, but the court had the opportunity to hear evidence from all sides. So we were in a very good position to basically find out whether there was any manipulation or there was any deliberate favoring of one candidate or the other, and we basically said no.
We also spoke to a London-based IT expert on the same. While declining to appear on camera, he was categorical that for any finality to be found on the issue, the computers upon which these databases were supposedly being manipulated on would need to be forensically audited. Even with Oswago's claims as the CEO of the IEBC that their data systems may have been manipulated, as well as Joseph's own claims that the TNA and IEBC results data was being cross-read, whether or not the electronic tally was being manipulated is something that cannot be conclusively proven until all the machines allegedly used are audited. The implications, should these allegations be proven, would be telling. But essentially, the final election result was not one decided on the basis of an electronic provisional tally.
Even the previous day, before the general election, we had a dry run at Bomas, and we experienced numerous challenges. So we were alive to the reality that this system, perhaps, because of the volumes of the data flows, and perhaps the system can collapse. Whereas we have regulations that are very clear in black and white as to what is expected of the Electoral Commission, mostly in regard to the transmission of the results. But we are also alive to the reality of the so-called verification of the results. What was supposed to be transmitted really were the interim results, but the physical verification was the ultimate test, really, to vote the veracity of every single number that was flowing through the system.
The physical paper trail of the March 2013 election unravels just what perhaps was the secret to the victory of the Jubilee coalition over CORD.
We had close to in excess of 100,000 agents.
The representative of TNA said, whatever these results are showing, we are going to win on the first round.
He has received more than 50.07%.
We won this election at 6 a.m. By 9 a.m., the only thing I was doing myself is just checking the Assumption of Office Act.
But in this paper trail lie glaring flaws. Flaws associated with what is the DNA of any election. Errors right down from the polling station in the replacement of the Form 16A of 2007, Form 34.
That is the name of the game. If you don't protect the integrity of the vote at the polling station, the whole election base falls out.
The election was free, fair.
There were many different kinds of problems with Form 34.
I would want an extension on one thing, the whole issue of scrutiny.
And the subsequent forms used to tally the results as announced at the polling station, Form 36.
After the results were announced, I said that democracy was on trial.
I think if they had had some of us, it could have been winnable.
It is the decision of the court.
I've been myself told that I had somebody put a gun to my head.
That the third and fourth respondents were validly elected.
I asked them, what about the other 5 heads?
3 minutes, nothing seriously written.
Uhuru Kenyatta was elected president fair, square, outright, and he is a president by the choice of a majority of Kenyans.
Haya, tumshangilie kwa makofi.
John-Allan Namu, KTN, for the Inside Story.